Getting in the front door, as one patient put it, is the most basic element of disability-competent care. The third pillar, physical access, involves much more than the front entrance. But if people with disabilities can't get access to the clinic or office, they can't get equal care. As a primary care provider, it may feel daunting and expensive to invest in physical accommodations for your practice. But the fact is, many small clinics and primary care practices have successfully retrofitted accessible features without great expense, and with great value added to their practice.
A lot of businesses can get tax breaks from making their place accessible and things like that. We talk a lot of businesses about doing some of the tax incentives for how they can make their building more accessible. And financially is that you just would have an increase in clients. That would increase their business in itself.
When assessing your facility's physical access, attention needs to be paid to the seemingly little things, such as space in the waiting room for a wheelchair, to bigger elements, such as doorways and accessible exam tables.
In the waiting room, if it's completely filled with chairs for people who are ambulatory, there's no place except in the middle of the room for a person with a wheelchair.
You get the impression when you kind of go in there that none of the offices there are really set up for people with disabilities like me. The waiting room's really small. I felt like no matter where I kind of was waiting, I was in the way.
We just every now and then leave a space open where a person with a wheelchair can be.
So, let's follow the physical journey for an individual with a disability to access a healthcare facility and see what's been done. It begins with transportation. Facilities that are within a quarter mile of public transit make it easier for not only persons with disabilities to access care, but also people with lower incomes or those without personal transportation. When arriving at your facility, there needs to be a curb ramp as well as a reserved and clearly marked area for drop-off and pickup. Accessible parking is probably the most recognized element of the ADA. Mark your accessible parking spaces with a vertical sign posted with the international symbol of accessibility. Once the patient has reached your office or clinic, the entry route to the building needs to be barrier-free with curb cuts and ramps for those who use a wheelchair, scooter, walker, or other mobility device. It's important to maintain the entrance route as well, making sure there is no damage, such as buckling sidewalks, debris, or snow that can create an obstacle. Make sure you post clear, legible signs so everyone can find the accessible entrance. Doorways are another point of entry essential for access. You might think of power assist buttons as the only feature needed to make a door accessible, but accessible entrances need to have enough space to maneuver as well. If your practice is located inside of a larger office building, interior routes to the medical office itself need to be considered. Make sure hallways are wide enough and the path should be free of any obstructions. If there are stairs or steps of any kind, handrails need to be provided on both sides. And elevator access must be available for those who can't maneuver steps. Elevators themselves need to be accessible too, with control panels and labels that are within reach for those who use wheelchairs, and have both visible and audible signals as well as braille indicators. Not all interior office doors can be power assisted, but they need to be accessible, with enough room, proper handles, and require only 5 pounds of force to open. Interior signage is another element that is important for access for individuals with disabilities. They should be low enough for all to see and have raised letters, braille, and highly legible text.
Something that's very important to me is having very large signs because sometimes I just don't want to have to ask someone, where is the office, when there's a sign right in front of me pointing to the office.
The reception area is the place an individual first interacts directly with your practice, and it should be a place that makes everyone feel welcome.
Specifically, this office now is you see countertops, and then behind that you see computers. And I don't see anyone until they stand up, and they don't see me unless I say something.
At the same doctor's office, their counter height was too high. So the counter height's here, and they're sitting behind it, and I can't see them, and so I'm having to reach up to grab everything. So lowered counter height, it would be nice.
Reception and waiting areas need to feel safe and calm for individuals with cognitive or emotional disabilities as well. The person who greets visitors at the reception desk can make all the difference to providing disability-competent care. A warm, thoughtful interaction with the right questions asked can help assure equal access and make the individual feel cared for. For many individuals with disabilities, access is dependent on a service animal. Signage should clearly indicate, and staff should be trained to always allow service animals. Accessible restrooms and stalls are also essential.
I went to use the restroom and I couldn't get into the stall door because the stall door wasn't wide enough for my wheelchair.
Exam rooms should be comfortable and easy to maneuver for everyone, regardless of ability. While many practices feel that accessible exam tables are cost prohibitive, the fact is, if patients with a disability cannot be examined on a table like everyone else, they are not receiving equal or adequate care.
Most of our exam tables are about this high off the ground. They don't move. They're narrow. There's a narrow step to get onto the table. So having a table that lowers down to chair height is ideal. It's much safer for elderly patients who have balance issues and mobility issues to just sit down like they would in a chair and not have to try to climb onto a table. And if you would examine a typical patient on the exam table, lying down flat so you can examine their abdomen, for example, you need to do the same exam for a person who uses a wheelchair, and to do that you need to get them out of their wheelchair onto the table, and at times that will require an overhead lift.
Accessible scales are needed for individuals who use wheelchairs.
And the typical scales that we use have a small platform that someone needs to stand on. And so having a wheelchair scale in the office is really essential for a person who uses a wheelchair. But I'll mention that it's good for a lot of other people as well. People with balance problems, older people who are unsteady on their feet.
I said, "Oh, do you guys have a scale? I'd really like to know my weight." And they say, "Oh, sorry, we don't have a wheelchair scale." Well, that's really hard for me because they always ask me, "Well, what do you think you weigh?" Well, I don't know really, So unless I've been in a facility as a wheelchair scale, I don't know.
When patients call to schedule an appointment for the first time, the scheduler needs to respectfully discuss the level of physical accessibility needed and explain the details of the site's accessibility that may impact the person before the appointment is made. Practices and clinics also need to place information about accessibility of their facility in an easy-to-find place on their website. That way, an individual with a disability can assess if your practice is open to them.
The one change, I guess, I would like to see is all offices are accessible to all people. Not just the facility, the physical barriers that may be presented, but the communication, the helping out, the having the time to sit there and talk to your doctor, from training the staff to the doctors being more understanding and receptive of your needs, and then making the whole facility accessible. I think that's the key.
With a minimal investment of capital and energy, your practice, clinic, or network can create an environment and atmosphere that welcomes everyone, and where everyone, regardless of ability, gets equal access and equal care. This video series and the accompanying materials are meant to give you information and tips. They're not intended to supersede the requirements found in the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. As you begin to assess and make changes in your practice, it is important to consult the ADA for precise requirements.